Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to take a look at Hive Digital Technologies as well as Bitfarms. They just got done putting out press releases in terms of a letter of intent that was signed between the two companies. Bitfarms is selling one of their site locations over to Hive. We're going to go over the hash rate implications as well as the pricing that was involved in this transaction. And then after that, we're going to take a look at some SEC filings, some old press releases in terms of Bitfarms, because they did put out on the table that they potentially would be acquiring another company. That's right, it's a potential merger that will take place. There is a prospectus that's out for a shareholder vote. So we're going to take a look at some of those details and see what does that do for Bitfarms in terms of overall hash rate in the year of 2025. So with all that said, let's get right into it. All right, we're going to start with this X post. We're going to work our way through some press releases, digging into the details, as well as some investor presentations. And then, as I mentioned later on, we're going to look at a potential merger with Bitfarms and another company. So let's start here, and I will quote. We're thrilled to share the news of our binding LOI with Hive for the Yguazu site in Paraguay. This strategic move is another step forward in our strategy to diversify beyond Bitcoin mining, capitalize on significant growth opportunities in HPC AI, streamline operations, and accelerate growth in the US. Now, they are going to be selling this Paraguay site, and they do plan on increasing their footprint in the US, specifically in the state of Pennsylvania. But we'll talk a little bit more on that in future slides. Let's continue reading. It says, here's why this matters. Transaction values Yguazu at 85 million, reinvested in our 1 gigawatt energy pipeline in Pennsylvania. Pro forma year-end 2025 energy portfolio optimized to 80% North America and only 20% international. This lowers estimated average power costs by about 10% for Bitfarms, and it enhances operational efficiency. The sale underscores our commitment to delivering long-term value for shareholders while achieving strong and sustainable growth. Stay tuned for more updates and on our US expansion. Now remember, this news is coming right after the heels of that DeepSeek fiasco. We saw a lot of the Bitcoin mining companies, as well as some of the chip makers, really struggling the day that that news kind of broke out, and panic kind of set in on a lot of these tech stocks in the US market. Since then, a lot of these tech stocks have started to rebound. We're starting to actually see some earnings coming out for some of them. So that's helping just reaffirm the strong growth that we have in these tech stocks. But let's continue on. Let's go ahead and just take a quick look at this specific site, and then we're going to actually reference this when we look at that investor presentation. You can see here it's under construction. Some of the location, may be energized now, but it still has some work to be done. So when Hive does take this project over, they're going to get a partial boost in their hash rate, and then it's going to take them a little bit of time to be able to get the rest of that fully energized to take potential of the full amount of power available at this specific location. And jumping over to Hive's X profile, you're going to see this quick blurb from them. It says, just in, Hive acquires Bitfarm's 200 megawatt Paraguay site, targeting 400% global hash rate growth by September. And we're going to go over that a little bit further. It does say that this does set the stage for them to hit that 25 exahash per second by September. So that is going to be pretty huge for a Hive. It looks like they are starting to really dive in and try to make a name for themselves as one of the top Bitcoin miners. They are a little bit still behind schedule considering how high up on hash rate Mara as well as CleanSpark and a few others are. But I think it is very good news to see another company like Hive really putting forth a lot of focus on the Bitcoin mining side of the operations. And we're going to take a little bit of a gander down here. There is some notes as far as some quotes by some of their executive chairman and their president and CEO. But then there's the actual full uh, press release, and that's what we're going to take a look at right now. All right, let's take a look at this press release from Hive. I'm going to skip some of the redundant information that I already shared in the previous post, but definitely want to take a look at some of these additional Easter eggs, if you want to call them that, or just some additional details that Hive did share in this press release. So this press release is rather fresh. This is as of January 28th, and they released it at their San Antonio, Texas location. But let's take a look at these specific details. So we're jumping down here. I'm going to go ahead and kind of highlight this section we're going to start with. It says this acquisition will accelerate Hive's growth, increasing its global Bitcoin mining hash rate from 6 exahash per second today to an anticipated 25 exahash by September. And they are saying that this will cement them as an industry leader. So as I mentioned, you have CleanSpark, you have Mara. Hive is trying to knock at the door. They would like to be one of those main players as the continued struggle for hash rate dominancy is going to be important as more and more hash rate becomes energized around the globe. The level of difficulty to be able to mine that same amount of Bitcoin is also increasing. So let's continue reading here. It says Hive's enhanced operational capacity in Paraguay will total 300 megawatt. Remember, this is only a 200 megawatt transaction with Bitfarms. So they already had 100 megawatts in the region of Paraguay. So it kind of makes sense because now they're going to be able to have a regional manager to kind of oversee these different site locations. So let's continue on. Bringing its global capacity, including existing facilities in Canada and Sweden, to 430 megawatts by Q3 2025. This milestone reflects Hive's commitment to operating entirely on 100% green hydroelectricity energy while solidifying its leadership as one of Latin America's largest Bitcoin mining operations. And it actually breaks down the two-phase approach for the development of this. As you could see from the picture, this site is not fully built out yet. So phase one says scheduled for completion by April 1st, 2025. It's already about 80% complete. As you can see from the photo, there was a significant amount of construction already complete there at this Paraguay location. So the essential infrastructure is already nearing readiness. Phase one will add approximately 6 exahash of capacity. And as you recall from earlier on in this press release, they already have 6. So that's going to double their hash rate in just the next couple of months. And they are planning to be fully hashing at this phase one site by quarter two of 2025. And it says that Hive will be assuming the remaining payments in this phase, which includes payments to full energization. So we'll talk a little bit about that payment structure and some of the pricing as we continue on. All right, looking at phase two, you can see here it's expected to complete by August 31st, 2025. Phase two is going to add another 6.5 exahash. So they would have already been at 12. This is going to get them to 18.5. This 6.5 exahash is going to be done through hydro-cooled ASICs, leveraging that advanced efficiency. Now, if you know anything about these Bitcoin miners, they have air-cooled style, they have immersion style. The air-cooled style doesn't quite dissipate the heat as well as the immersion style. So if you are trying to go for the latest and greatest in terms of that joules per terahash reduction, you're going to want to make sure that you are looking into these immersion style miners. Hive estimates the total cost to complete the site to 200 megawatts to be $400,000 per megawatt upon completion. So, doing the quick math there, we're talking about $80 million as just the remaining funds due. This is not necessarily inclusive of what they paid Bitfarms. So just think about that in terms of that letter of intent. Just exactly what was that all paid for, considering they're taking over and footing the bill for the rest of this project completion. And additionally, Hive's separate previously announced 100 megawatt project in Paraguay remains on track for energization by June 2025, which will provide 6.5 exahash per second of hash rate from Bitmain 21 plus hydro-cooled ASICs, bringing Hive's interim target to 13 exahash per second. So it looks like between those two sites, phase two site and the 100 megawatts that they've already announced, that's going to get them about 13 exahash per second of just these hydro-cooled ASICs. So looking at the original 6 that's already online, looking at phase 1 6, that puts them at 12, and then the other 13, we're looking at 25 exahash per second. As I mentioned, this is all going to be done and completed by the end of August. So by September, they are expected to hit that 25 exahash per second. And let's take a look a little bit further down here. We're going to look at this strategic investment and community impact as our just got done calculating to achieve its ambitious 25 exahash target. Hive has already strategically secured ASICs for 15 exahash per second from its Bitmain 21 Plus Hydro ASICs. And they talk about that press release. And then they also mention a Canaan Avalon A series miners. This press release was put out back in November 10th, as well as on the 20th of 2024. We're going to take a quick look at that in just a minute. I found the Canaan website for investor relations. We're going to take a look at this specific press release from them. But let's continue on. It says here that Hive has plans for additional ASIC purchases in the coming months to reach that 25 exahash per second. Hive targets a global efficiency of 16.5 joules per terahash efficiency once the 25 exahash milestone is reached, based on their current ASIC offerings in the market. So these investments do provide some additional rapid returns in order to ensure improved efficiency and lower costs of the Bitcoin production. So the more efficient you can get your miners, and especially if you're using some renewable energy like these green energy site locations, you're giving yourself a very low cost to mine Bitcoin. So that's going to help in if there's ever additional bear markets for Bitcoin. This specific strategy is going to hedge them for that. Not to mention in a bull market, they're going to be making hand over fist revenue per Bitcoin. Now, we're going to look at the transaction details next. And then we're going to take a look at Bitfarm, same transaction details. There's a slight discrepancy between the two. I just want to point that out. And if I'm missing it on this Hive press release, please let me know in the comment section. But transaction details, this acquisition valued at 56 million includes ownership of a 240 MVA substation with 200 megawatts of capacity, as well as associated land and facilities. Key terms includes 25 million payable at closing, scheduled for Q1 of 25, 31 million payable in equal installments over 6 months following this closing. And then in addition, Hive assumes the 19 million of PPA deposits due to this energy provider, which is the utility company, and assumes the remaining construction completion costs after signing the binding LOI. So we talked a little bit about that. $80 million of construction costs still to go. So if you think about it, there's the $56 million that they're talking about here, plus the 19 million for the utility company, and then the 80 million for the remainder of the construction costs. So it says that this transaction will be financed by Hive's existing cash and digital currency balance sheet. So it looks like they will be selling some of their Bitcoin HODL. All right, and let's just take a quick look at some of the details behind the miners that Hive has acquired through Canaan. We're going to go ahead and jump down to the second paragraph here. Again, this press release was from November 11th. It's a little bit older, but I did want to share some of these details now that it becomes more relevant with this Paraguay site. So according to the purchase agreement, CCG, which is Canaan, provides Hive with 6,500 Avalon A1566 miners with an average computing power of 185 terahash per second. Of the 6,500 miners, 500 miners will be immediately delivered and scheduled for installation. The remaining 6,000 will be delivered in 4 monthly shipments of 1,500 units from December 24 through March 25. So by about a month or so from now, maybe a month and a half, they should have the full amount of these miners ready to be energized at either the Paraguay grid or one of their other locations. So I thought it was pretty interesting just to kind of look at some of the more details behind the number of miners and then what the amount of terahash was. All right, and jumping over to Bitfarms press release, wanted to go through one of the details. As I mentioned, I saw a little discrepancy between the two. But again, this is their binding LOI agreement. They talked a little bit about how they plan to reinvest some of that money. They're saying that this valuation is at 85 million. It significantly reduces some of their anticipated capital requirements. They talk a little bit about some of those capital requirements on one of their investor presentations. In fact, they have a new investor presentation that was just published this month in January 2025. I'll share a link to that in the description. But looking into this specific press release a little bit more, I'm not going to rehash the fact they already talked about the 80-20 North America versus international, and of course, their expected energy costs or the power costs to be reduced. But I want to stick to some of these terms. So looking down into the terms of this binding LOI, I'm going to start just right from the top here. Under the terms of binding LOI, Hive will purchase from Bitfarms its 100% ownership stake of its Yguazu, Paraguay Bitcoin mining site. The proposed transaction values the completed site at approximately 85 million, inclusive of approximately 19 million of power deposits with ANDE and the assumption of remaining capital obligations. Bitfarms to receive 25 million upon closing of the transaction, 31 million over 6 months following closing, and then 19 million is the reimbursement for the power deposits that Bitfarms already made to the utility company there. And then here's the difference that I noticed. It says an additional approximately $10 million in remaining capital obligations. So I thought that was interesting. If you look at the other press release, they talk about the 25 for closing, the additional 31 for later on. So that's the 56. And then they did mention the additional 19 for the utility company, but they never mentioned this other 10 million for capital obligation. So I thought that was interesting personally that that $10 million was not listed on the other press release. Again, if I missed that somehow, please let me know. And then they talk a little bit about some of the benefits. It does mention that this specific sale, it is going to reduce their end of fiscal year, I'm sorry, end of calendar year 2025 megawatt capacity for Bitcoin mining from 955 to 755. So I thought that was interesting as well. As we talked about with some of these other Bitcoin mining companies, they are making that pivot into that HPC AI. So this is one of those scenarios. And again, it says that it does not impact their minor deployment schedule. So I thought that was interesting that they're going to be dropping out about 200 megawatts from their overall footprint, but yet it's not going to impact minor deployment schedule. So they must have not quite purchased the remaining miners they would have needed to get to that 955 megawatt. At least that's my take. All right. And as I mentioned, just quickly wanted to point out this investor presentation. This is from Bitfarms. This was a January 2025 presentation. This was before, I'm assuming the letter of intent was signed, of course. But you can see here that the Paraguay site is listed on the right-hand side. It is 200 megawatts, and they had the hash rate sitting at about 15 exahash per second. So again, that's a pretty good amount of hash rate. If you remember, from what Hive is planning on for that site, it was only going to be about 12 and a half exahash per second. So it looks like, at least from my understanding, it looks like Bitfarms was going to be installing a little bit more advanced Bitcoin miners in order to hit that 15 exahash per second. But regardless, the 200 megawatts will be getting shifted over to Hive. Hive will be increasing their hash rate, plans to get up to 25 exahash per second by September of 2025. So I think that's a good move for Hive. I'm interested to see how Bitfarms reuses this 85 million of capital. And then also, I'm interested to see if Hive is able to keep that capital expense as planned as the construction is already underway. Will they incur any additional costs? And then when are they going to choose to sell their digital currencies in order to help pay for some of that? Are they going to do it all at once? Are they going to strategically look for opportunities when Bitcoin starts to spike a little bit more? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I do find it interesting that we are starting to see a little bit of movement between these different Bitcoin mining companies in terms of different acquisitions, as the Bitcoin halving has already taken place, with some of these companies kind of doing that pivot over to HPC and AI. And speaking of acquisitions, I did want to cover a merger before we end the video. So let me jump over to that between Bitfarms and another company. All right. And as I mentioned, this specific merger, this specific acquisition between Bitfarms and Stronghold Digital Mining, it's not new news. However, there have been some relevant information that just came out this past week in SEC filings. So if you take a look at this specific proxy statement, this specific prospectus, you can see that it's dated for January 21st, 2025. So although the initial discussions and agreement and plan for this merger actually happened back in August of 2024, this has not yet fully materialized. There does need to be a shareholder vote in order to make this thing valid. But let's take a look at a little bit at this specific proxy statement and read through if it's your first time seeing it. I'm also going to put this in the description in case you want to look into more details. But just wanted to quickly do some high level research between this Stronghold Digital Mining Company and Bitfarms for this merger. So, reading through, it says if the merger is completed, you will receive 2.52 common shares of Bitfarms, no par value, for each share of Stronghold Class A stock. So, any shareholders of Stronghold Digital Mining, they are going to be receiving some Bitfarm stock. So, the Bitfarm ticker will remain listed, and this other Stronghold Digital Mining company's stock ticker will be going away. So again, this exchange ratio is fixed. It will not be adjusted, reflecting any change to pricing between the Stronghold common stock and the Bitfarm common shares. So again, we don't have to worry about having to redo the calculations on the day whenever this specific merger finally happens. They already talked about it. They have that basically 2.5 ratio between Stronghold Mining and Bitfarms. So we're going to skip this next section here. Talks a little bit more about some of the closing prices, how they came up with the number on August 21st, 2024, when they initially kind of wrote up this proposition, if you will. So, looking down a little bit further, we're going to skip some of this. I want to get down into the details of what it means in terms of Bitcoin mining, in terms of hash rate. What all do we know about uh, Stronghold digital mining, and how is it going to benefit Bitfarms in this merger? So again, they talk a little bit about some of the currency exchanges, nothing too exciting there. I want to get down into the table of contents. We're going to kind of look through here. There's a special meeting. They haven't actually put out the time, date, and place. If you click on that, you're going to see a blank spot for the month and day. So this is still up in the air. It is still in a draft form, if you will. It has not been finalized. But I did want to go through this merger proposal and then what's all going to be considered. So this is page 38. So looking at this, here's a transaction structure. The merger agreement provides that the subject to the terms and conditions of the merger agreement and the effective time, the merger sub and indirect wholly subsidiary of Bitfarms will merge with and into Stronghold. As a result, Stronghold will survive the merger as an indirect wholly owned subsidiary of Bitfarms. In addition, the merger agreement provides that immediately prior to and conditioned on the effective time, Stronghold shall effect the conversion of the exchanges. The terms and conditions of the merger are contained in the merger agreement, which is described in the proxy statement prospectus attached to this specific statement. It's Annex A1 and Annex A2. So, of course, you can read through all of that detail. So, that's very interesting. So, although the Bitfarms ticker is going to survive, this is almost like a reverse merger because Stronghold is going to become the controlling or the owning party in this acquisition. So very interesting. So let's look at the merger consideration under the terms of the agreement. If the merger is completed, each share of the Stronghold common stock issued and outstanding immediately prior to the effective time after giving effect to the exchanges will automatically be converted into the merger consideration. So you can see here, they don't actually have the date yet because it has not been fully set. You're going to see a lot of blanks in here. So let's continue through here. So some more about the background behind the two. So in the summer of 21, Stronghold discussed potential merger and acquisition tran- transaction with several parties, including Bitfarms. However, discussions between Stronghold and potential M&A, including Bitfarms, ultimately ceased in the summer of 21. So as you know, after these halvings take place, certain Bitcoin miners they start to kind of drop off a little bit. It's a very capital intensive game in order to be able to stay relevant as the amount of Bitcoin rewards per block mined is cut in half. So again, reading on a little bit further down, we're going to skip this section here about their IPO that they put out with some of their cryptocurrencies. And we're going to look down here at February 17th, 2022, at a meeting of Bitfarms board of directors. The directors consider Stronghold as a potential candidate for a strategic merger, and the board directed Bitfarms management to initiate preliminary due diligence on Stronghold. And on April 6th of 2022, the chief executive officer and a few other execs of Stronghold and a few other people from special projects. They met to re-engage and discuss a potential business combination, resulting in the execution of a mutual non-disclosure agreement between Stronghold and Bitfarms. So it's kind of just giving you the play-by-play of exactly how this ended up unfolding. I don't want to go through all of this here on this video, so please, again, if you want to read through this, I'll have the link in the description. I'm just getting to the good part, which would be them actually coming to this conclusion in August. So continuing through it, this actually carried on for quite some time. I am new to Bitfarms in terms of covering and as an investor taking a look at them. So I don't necessarily have these details that maybe an astute long-term Bitfarm investor may have. So again, if there's some specific details that are extremely important and you are one of those long-term investors, drop a comment, let me know so that I can get that added into the messaging here. So moving on down here, we're getting closer to this August date. So August 2nd, 6th, 14th, 18th. So here we are. On August 18th, Stronghold Management sent an email update to the Stronghold Board of Directors summarizing the proposed resolution of the open points in the merger agreement, describing the new set of management projections reflecting the increased capacity commitment payments. And then it says, following a meeting of the board of directors on August 19th, the full management teams of Stronghold and Bitfarms and their respective legal advisors held a series of calls regarding the mining facility conditions, agreeing to modify certain mining facility conditions to include a concept that Stronghold has received interconnection agreements or written correspondence from Key JM permitting the importation of a certain amount of power to such facilities. So looks like they had to basically get over some of the red tape, but it does say that the merger agreement was in final form by August 20th, 2024. Again, you can kind of read through a little bit more of this information, and then it says early the next morning on the 21st, the parties executed the merger agreement and related documents later that morning prior to the opening of trading. So Bitfarms and Stronghold issued joint press releases announcing that transaction. So again, if you were already invested, you have already heard about this transaction. I just thought it was relevant because there was a new prospectus or new proxy draft that was put out. So it does look like we are getting closer to this shareholder vote. And at that vote, it looks like there will be opportunity to either move forward with this merger or not. So again, I think it's pretty interesting. And again, they go through some of those additional information. I think that this was pretty good. I'm going to read through a little bit of this because we are talking about some of the monies involved as well as some of these other Bitcoin miners. So, as discussed, advanced as these discussions advanced during the week of September 2nd of 24, the parties agreed on the following, among other things, subject to approval by each party's board of directors. A hosting agreement will be based on the same form as Stronghold has executed previously with unaffiliated third parties. Hosting agreement term would be through December of 2025, would remain in effect even if the merger agreement is terminated or if the merger fails to close. So Bitfarms would place with Stronghold a $7.8 million deposit under the hosting agreement, which is about $70 per megawatt. Multiply by that 50 megawatts in 93 days. This is basically the timeline for when it would get repaid through the hosting agreement. So they're basically putting that money up front, and over the hosting term, it will get paid back. If the merger agreement is terminated, Bitfarms termination fee is owed in connection with this termination up to $5 million. So they've already basically put a good amount of money. It's not a gentleman's handshake here. There is already a substantial amount of money on the table in this specific contract that's already been signed and approved by both legal parties. All right. Now let's finally jump down into the details of why Bitfarms is agreeing to this merger. So we're going to start with that first bullet. Diversify Bitfarms' access to power and integrate vertically, expand and rebalance its energy portfolio to approximately 50% in the US by year end 2025 by adding two strategically located power facilities with flexibility to generate power or import power from the grid. All right, let's skip the second bullet. Let's go down to the third bullet here. It says offer an opportunity for a transformative fleet upgrade to improve efficiency and hash rate. As of June 30th, 2024, Stronghold had a hash rate of 4 exahash per second, supported by Stronghold's existing fleet of miners, which consist of models used since 2021 and 2022. These miners are less energy efficient than the current generation of miners as they consume more, approximately double the energy per unit of hash rate compared to miners developed in 24. Following the consummation of the merger, Bitfarms intends to replace Stronghold's existing fleet of miners with new generation Bitcoin equipment, which has the potential to bring the hash rate to approximately 10 exahash per second in 2025 with these upgrades. So that's pretty amazing. They're going to be able to take the same infrastructure and go from 4 up to 10 just by switching to the latest and greatest of miners. And then they talk a little bit about that HPCAI. Cannot skip that. This is the hot topic that everyone likes to talk about here. So, integrate high performance computing artificial intelligence with Bitcoin mining to boost profitability due to the ability to expand to fiber optic networks available at Stronghold's existing sites. HPC AI applications require high speed, low latency, high bandwidth data transmission. High fiber optic cables are well suited to provide expansive access to fiber optic networks at Stronghold Scrubgrass plant and Panther Creek plant is expected to contribute to Bitfarm's HPC AI implementation strategy and to allow for potential large scale data center development. So, again, they're able to take one of these locations and go from 4 to 10 exahash, and then they're able to take another location and go ahead and get it integrated, get it built up to be a solid data center. They already have a lot of the necessary infrastructure behind that with some of these high performance fiber optic cables. And moving on to the last couple of bullets here, we're going to take a look at the use of technologies. So, exactly how does Stronghold generate their power? There was some coal refuse and waste. So, not looking to do that. They're looking more for sustainable technology focused on environmental remediation and reclaim services. So, Stronghold generates electricity using coal refuse, and its primary fuel source is waste coal, which is provided by various third parties. So this is recycled coal. So if you think about a coal plant generating electricity, there's going to be some amount of recycled coal that's available for whoever would like to buy it. So in this case, this is what Stronghold's been doing. They've been purchasing this um, initial waste and then repurposing it to help generate some additional electricity. So, again, this technology creates environmentally beneficial operations because extracting coal refuse transforms the waste into power generating material, which has the benefit of reclaiming the land and reducing potential of heavy metal contamination of waterways and other types of pollution caused by coal reuse or refuse. Following the completion of the merger, Bitfarms intends to continue such environmentally beneficial operations, achieve favorable transaction economics through an all stock deal structure while maintaining balance sheet strength to support future growth. So, there you have it. Part of this merger is going to be utilizing some of the share equity. So, again, I think it's important that Bitfarms really puts out the value, starts to make due on some of these targets that they have for fiscal year 25 prior to tapping into that shareholder equity. At least that's my personal opinion on doing that. And moving on to Stronghold's reason for this merger. So, why would Strongholds want to reverse merge basically into Bitfarms? And again, Stronghold's board of directors unanimously recommended that the Stronghold stockholders vote for this merger proposal. So here's some of those examples. I'm going to go over the bullets here. Premium exchange ratio and form of merger consideration. So of course, looking at that exchange ratio of 1 to 2.5 of Bitfarms common shares, that's going to be great for the shareholders. And then there's also and then I'm sorry, this actually provides a 71% premium on looking at that 90-day volume weighted average, so VWAP, for Stronghold stockholders. Second thing is larger and more liquid market capitalization. So again, combining the two market caps together, it's going to give them a little bit more assets, if you will, on their balance sheet, as well as some additional share equity. And the next is going to be meaningful ownership of the combined company. So the Stronghold board of directors considered that the merger with Bitfarms would allow the Stronghold stockholders to have a meaningful ownership interest in larger enterprise with an expected ownership of the combined company of up to 13.4% based on Bitfarms common shares outstanding as of June 30th, 2024. And then talk a little bit more about some strategic alternative processes, alternative transactions, some financial rationale behind the merger, some credit and the cost of capital, some improved liquidity, increasing potential for some growth. And this does reduce some of the company's current concern on liquidity. They talk a little bit more about some of the transaction, waiver, and termination agreements. And then again, they did look at their financial advisor, and it is, in their opinion as well, the right thing to do. They do consider this financially responsible. And then just the terms. The terms for this merger does look good for Stronghold. So again, um, Stronghold's not necessarily looking at it in terms of the Bitcoin mining capabilities. They're, as the owner of this, it just makes more sense for the shareholders. They're going to benefit more than the existing Bitfarms shareholders will. However, Bitfarms is going to be able to utilize their infrastructure, their different power providers, and some of their other activities in order to continue to grow the Bitfarms Bitcoin uh, footprint. All right, and that wraps it up for me, folks. Hope you enjoyed this rather long-winded update between Hive Digital and Bitfarms in terms of that LOI for that Paraguay location. We talked a little bit about the hash rates that are involved. We talked about some of the price that's involved as well. And then we shifted over and talked a little bit more about Bitfarms and this potential merger, which has already been signed. We're just waiting for that shareholder meeting to make it 100% complete, but it's between Bitfarms and Stronghold Digital Mining. So if you like this update, please consider giving the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts. I know this is a lot of information to take in. I will have those links in the description, but by all means, take a look, let me know your thoughts. And with that said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you on the next one.